In the smallest country on earth, hidden behind ancient stone walls, lies one of the most mysterious places known to man. It's not a treasure vault, not a chapel, not even a tomb. It is a library. But not just any library. This is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once known as the Secret Archive. Stretching over 53 miles of shelving containing more than 1.1 million documents, it holds not only the history of the Catholic Church, but perhaps the hidden history of the world itself. Officially established in 1612 by Pope Paul V, the archive has always been shrouded in silence. It is not open to the public. It is not listed on tourist maps. It is not searchable online. To enter, one must be a credentialed scholar, pre-approved by the Vatican. Even then, you must know the exact catalog number of the document you want to see. But how can you request a secret if you don't know it exists? Many believe the Vatican archive houses materials too dangerous for public eyes. Religious texts that were deliberately excluded from Scripture. Historical records that contradict modern teachings. And documents that could shake the very foundations of faith, politics, and science. Among the known items stored inside: letters from Michelangelo, arguing with the Pope over unpaid wages. The trial records of Galileo Galilei, as he faced the Inquisition for claiming Earth revolved around the sun. Documents detailing the excommunication of Martin Luther, the spark of the Protestant Reformation. A letter from Abraham Lincoln to Pope Pius IX. And even requests by Hitler's regime during World War II. But what's publicly known is only the surface. Beneath it may lie something far more powerful, and far more concealed. There are whispers of the lost Gospels. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Judas. These writings paint a very different picture of Jesus, not as an unreachable divinity but as a teacher, a revolutionary, even a man with a family. Could it be that early church leaders suppressed these stories to protect a certain narrative? And if so, what would happen if those truths came to light now? Some claim that buried deep within the archive lies the chronovisor, a mysterious device said to have been created by a team of scientists and priests in the 1950s. According to a Benedictine monk named Father Pellegrino Ernetti, the chronovisor could peer into the past, showing live images of historical events like the crucifixion of Christ. Ernetti even claimed to have seen it, to have witnessed the crucifixion with his own eyes. Is this the invention of a brilliant hoax, or was it quietly dismantled, stored away beneath Vatican floors, for fear of what it could reveal? Then there's the case of the third secret of Fatima. In 1917, 3 children in Portugal claimed to receive prophecies from the Virgin Mary. 2 of the secrets were eventually published. But the third was withheld for decades. When the Vatican finally released it in 2000, many experts were skeptical, saying it felt incomplete, even censored. Did the third secret predict the assassination of a pope? The collapse of the church? Or something worse? Is the full message still locked away, unseen? The archive may also hold answers to questions science has yet to solve. Pre-flood civilizations. Lost continents like Atlantis or Lemuria. Ancient contact with beings from the stars. Sounds like science fiction. But thousands of years ago, humans around the world shared myths about gods descending from the heavens, teaching language, farming, mathematics. Are these merely stories? Or coded memories of real events? And what of the exorcism records? The Church has long documented cases of possession, some so extreme that they were hidden from the public. There are rumors of rooms in the archive dedicated solely to these accounts. Transcripts of recorded voices. Descriptions of levitations. Eyewitness testimony from priests who saw what defied explanation. These files are locked for safety. But who, or what, are they really protecting? Some say the Vatican keeps a list of forbidden knowledge. Books that are never to be read. Maps never to be shown. Timelines never to be discussed. Could there be evidence that humans have risen and fallen in cycles? That we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth? Could there be charts of the Earth before the last pole shift, or records of celestial events that will happen again? What would that mean for how we view the future? There are even darker whispers of documents written in languages no modern scholar can read. Script etched on metal plates, sealed in wax, hidden in containers lined with gold. Manuscripts that speak of beings called the Watchers, fallen angels who taught early mankind forbidden arts. And of the Nephilim, giant offspring of these angels and humans, banished from the earth after a great cataclysm. Is it mythology, or buried history? To ask what's inside the archive is not just to ask about religion, but about humanity itself. Who we are, where we come from, and who decided what we're allowed to remember. The Church says the archive is for preservation. But preservation from what? Time or truth? We live in a world where questions are discouraged, where official stories are accepted without doubt. But beneath the Vatican, beneath the marble, the incense, the silence, lies a deeper story. One written in ink and dust, hidden in shadow, guarded not by locks, but by fear. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is real, and it is still active, still growing. What lies inside may never be revealed to us, but in asking the question, we awaken something powerful. The idea that truth, no matter how long it sleeps, will always wait to be found. As the soft echo of footsteps fades into silence, we descend further into the mythology of the Vatican's secretive archives, beneath its Renaissance splendor and sanctified corridors, where truth lies encrypted in ink and vellum. Many scholars have speculated that the secret library contains materials that could fundamentally reshape human understanding, not just of the Church but of history itself. Among these whispered holdings is a rumored correspondence between Pontius Pilate and Emperor Tiberius, supposedly documenting events surrounding the crucifixion of Jesus, an account that dramatically diverges from canonical Gospels. There are tales of a document known only as the Chronicles of the Watchers, an alleged pre-Christian scroll cataloging the interactions between heavenly beings and ancient mankind. The Church's early theologians deemed it apocryphal, too strange, too bold. Yet some claim it rests, sealed in brass tubes, behind leaded doors within the Vatican's subterranean vaults. And then there is the so-called Index of Forbidden Truths, a rumored directory of texts the Vatican not only hides but actively suppresses. Stories suggest it includes alternative Gospels, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Judas, and a controversial scroll discovered near Qumran that paints an entirely different picture of the early Messianic movement. Why suppress such texts? According to insiders, the Church fears fragmentation. To preserve a unified theology, certain truths, however compelling, may be deemed dangerous. But that only fuels the fire of curiosity. What if within those vaults lies evidence that the timeline of Christianity has been quietly adjusted? What if prophets and movements we've never heard of were scrubbed from history not by enemies, but by curators of faith themselves? There is also a geopolitical layer to this secrecy. Some believe the Vatican houses diplomatic letters between Renaissance popes and occult societies like the Rosicrucians, suggesting alliances or at least correspondence that would baffle modern historians. In the Age of Enlightenment, such associations would have been scandalous. Another frequently cited document is the so-called Codex Lux Dei, alleged to be a map of Earth's sacred geometrical points and how ancient civilizations aligned their temples, pyramids, and cathedrals along planetary energy grids. Supposedly, this codex was hand-delivered by a dying Templar knight in the 14th century. Its contents were never made public. While skeptics dismiss all this as conspiratorial folklore, it's important to understand how secrecy functions, not only to hide but to guard. In the Vatican's eyes, guarding sacred knowledge may not be suppression, but stewardship. And perhaps that's the most haunting question of all. Is the Church hiding truth to deceive, or to protect us from what we are not ready to comprehend? The archives remain closed, the keys held by a select few. But for every sealed door, there are countless dreamers, historians, and seekers pressing their ears against the wood, listening, not for answers but for the echo of forgotten truths. As we leave this first chapter behind, we are left not with clarity, but with a thickening mist of mystery, an invitation to keep digging, to keep wondering, and to ask, what else lies behind the veil? In our pursuit of what lies hidden, it is impossible not to touch upon the Vatican's relationship with the esoteric. Deep in the undercroft of its archives, some claim that sealed away are records not just of human history, but of knowledge far older, perhaps even pre-human. There are legends of the language of angels, an ancient script said to be recorded in a book the Vatican holds under triple lock. This language, according to believers, was the very tongue used to create the universe, inscribed by celestial beings long before human civilization rose. Linguists have searched in vain for even fragments of this so-called Enochian dialect, but it remains elusive, possibly by design. Then, there are the rumors involving lost technology. Several whispers reference a tome titled The Mechanisms of Eden, which supposedly details the operations of sacred machines, devices that once harmonized nature and spirit, used in temples of Sumer, Egypt, and early India. Some theorists believe this knowledge could explain how ancient cultures achieved impossible feats of engineering. Is it conceivable that such a document sits in the Vatican's vault, considered too dangerous for modern minds? Many have speculated that the Church holds a collection of artifacts, items that defy natural explanation. A mirror that reflects not your image but your essence. A chalice that purifies any liquid placed inside it. A shard of what some say is the actual 10 Commandments, not preserved as stone, but encoded in crystalline form. These objects, if they exist, are beyond relics. They are keys to alternate understandings of reality. In 1923, a Jesuit scholar named Father Ernetti claimed to have worked on a device called the chronovisor, an alleged time-viewing machine hidden away by the Vatican. According to Ernetti, this device allowed users to witness moments from the past as if watching through a screen. He said he had seen the crucifixion of Christ, the destruction of Sodom, and speeches from Cicero. While most dismiss the story as a fabrication, a small circle of researchers insist the chronovisor existed, and may still exist. The implications of these claims are staggering. If even one of them holds a grain of truth, the Vatican is not merely a guardian of Christian tradition, but a vault of the metaphysical, the technological, and the interdimensional. And let us not overlook their astronomical interests. The Vatican operates one of the world's most advanced observatories, overseen not by secular scientists, but by Jesuit astronomers. What drives this celestial curiosity? Some say they are watching for a return. Others believe they are searching for signs of intelligence that preceded us, and possibly made contact. There are hints, buried in Renaissance frescoes and medieval codices, that certain popes were initiated into mystery schools, custodians not only of theology, but of sacred geometry, alchemy, and lost rites. What if Vatican power was built not solely on scripture, but also on a hidden continuity of pre-Christian wisdom, passed down in whispers and symbols across millennia? As we conclude this chapter, remember, the power of the Vatican's secret archive is not just in what it may contain, but in the questions it compels us to ask. Its silence is deafening, its mystery unyielding. Yet in the void of its refusal to answer, imagination, and sometimes truth, rushes in. This is not merely history. This is the architecture of secrecy itself. And so we step back from the door, leaving fingerprints on the brass handles of forbidden knowledge, vowing to return. Because behind those ancient walls, where truth and myth converge, the greatest secrets of humanity may still sleep in ink and shadow. As the echo of Father Benedetti's footsteps faded into the dim corridors of the Vatican, a strange silence settled over Thomas. The manuscript he held, the one seemingly untouched for centuries, tugged at his curiosity with a force he could not resist. But it was not just the document that stirred something in him. It was the knowledge that someone, or something, intended for it to be found. With hesitant resolve, Thomas returned to the corridor where Father Benedetti had vanished. The ancient walls, cold and unyielding, seemed to whisper their secrets through the candlelit shadows. As he moved deeper into the archive, the lights grew dimmer. At the end of the corridor, behind a velvet curtain, Thomas discovered a small iron door. It wasn't on any of the blueprints he had memorized. No records, no mentions, nothing. He pressed his palm against the cold iron. To his surprise, the door creaked open with ease, revealing a narrow stone stairwell spiraling downward into pitch-black silence. With only the flickering light of his tablet screen, Thomas descended step by step. The air grew colder. The walls, covered in faded Latin inscriptions, seemed to pulsate with energy, some passages familiar, others indecipherable. The final step brought him to a massive chamber carved into the rock beneath Vatican City. It was circular, lined with stone alcoves containing scrolls, mechanical contraptions, and strange relics. And at its center stood a pedestal with a glass dome. Inside was a peculiar device, a polished bronze panel adorned with dials, gears, and crystalline lenses. Thomas froze. He had seen sketches of this before, in fringe history circles and forbidden books. This was the chronovisor. A mythical machine, allegedly built in the 1950s by a team of Vatican scientists and Benedictine monks, including Father Pellegrino Ernetti, said to allow users to witness scenes from history, live as if tuning into time itself. The Church had long denied its existence. And yet here it was. Thomas's breath trembled. The manuscript he had read earlier contained references to the Mirror of Truth and Time's Confession Booth. This must have been it. The pieces were fitting together in a way that defied reason. Could it really show the past? Or had it been buried because of what it revealed? He reached out, fingertips brushing the glass. A voice broke the silence. "You're not supposed to be here." Thomas spun around. In the archway stood a man in priestly garb, but there was something different about him. His eyes, dark and alert, seemed ancient, far older than his face. "I found the passage unlocked," Thomas said carefully. "And this device, what is it really?" The priest stepped forward. "That depends. Do you believe history should remain untouched?" Thomas hesitated. "I believe the truth deserves to be seen." The priest nodded solemnly. "Then you must understand, what this device shows is not always the truth we expect. History lies. Memories bend. And sometimes what you see," he paused, "can never be unseen." Thomas's heart pounded. "Why hide it?" "Because men have used it before," the priest said. "To manipulate, to justify, to destroy. Entire movements have claimed divine insight because of what the chronovisor showed them. But what if the images were filtered through fear or desire?" Thomas stepped closer to the device. "Then why keep it at all?" "Because someone always seeks it," the priest whispered. "If not you, then another. And if no one guards the past, it becomes a weapon in the wrong hands." He turned to leave, but before he did, he said one last thing. "You open the door. Now you'll need to decide what kind of truth you're willing to live with." As the chamber's silence returned, Thomas stared once more at the chronovisor. And he made a decision. He would activate it. The machine came to life with a soft hum, gears spinning slowly as the lenses flickered with golden light. Thomas adjusted a dial, unsure of what he was doing. Symbols moved across the display and then, suddenly, a hazy image formed on the central lens. It was a desert, a crowd, a wooden cross. He recoiled in disbelief. Jerusalem. Golgotha. The crucifixion. It wasn't a painting. It wasn't a recreation. It was real. The image was moving, faint wind stirring dust, voices crying in languages he didn't understand. The camera, if you could call it that, wasn't fixed in space. It shifted slightly, offering different perspectives as if guided by intent. He watched, spellbound, unable to look away. But then the scene changed. Now it showed a medieval chamber. A council of robed men around a scroll, arguing, writing, sealing a document. One word stood out on the wax stamp: Constantinople. Again the view changed, flashing quickly now. Thomas saw a burning library, robed monks fleeing with bundles of texts. He saw men kneeling before a glowing object hidden beneath a cathedral floor. He saw popes, dozens of them, whispering before tapestries depicting stars and strange maps. And finally he saw the chamber he stood in now, but empty. The images stopped. The chronovisor powered down. Thomas stood in stunned silence. Everything he had believed, everything the church had taught, was now intertwined with something far more ancient, more secret, and more powerful. The priest's voice returned, this time from behind him. Now you understand. Thomas turned slowly. These were all real? They were recorded, the priest replied. But the truth, Thomas, isn't just in the image. It's in the meaning. That's what makes it dangerous. Thomas nodded. And the manuscript was meant to lead me here? It was written by someone who used the chronovisor long before you, and left a warning. Thomas opened the manuscript again. There, scribbled in the margins of the final page, was a single Latin phrase: Tempus custos est nunc. You are now the keeper of time. The moment Thomas touched the central dial, the chamber responded like a living organism awakening from centuries of slumber. Gears hummed beneath the pedestal. The crystalline lens at the center of the chronovisor glowed with a dull amber light. Shadows danced along the walls as ancient circuitry sparked to life. A low mechanical hum resonated through the chamber. Then the glass dome opened with a faint hiss. Thomas hesitated. What would he ask to see? His mind raced. Moments in history, great turning points, religious truths, unanswered questions. But one name echoed louder than the rest: Christus. He entered a command in Latin, using the archaic interface of rotating glyphs and pressing pressure-sensitive metal symbols. He wasn't sure exactly how he knew what to do. It felt like intuition, or perhaps as if the device wanted to be used. Then the lens activated. The room around him fell away into silence, and before him, like a moving fresco, a vision began to form. Not a screen, more like a living window. The air seemed to warp and split as time peeled open. He saw a dusty road under a blazing Middle Eastern sun. A crowd gathered near a tree-lined hill. Roman soldiers pushed a man forward, wounded, barefoot, and bleeding. His eyes met Thomas's through time. Compassion, serenity, pain, all blended in one eternal gaze. Thomas gasped. This was not a painting. Not a reenactment. This was real. The crowd jeered. Women wept. The man fell to his knees. And then the vision vanished. Thomas stumbled backward, his legs weak. He had seen what billions had only believed. And now, something inside him was changed. But then, before he could react, the lens flickered again. Another scene emerged. This time, not of ancient Jerusalem. This was Rome. But not ancient. 20th century, dimly lit and hidden. A cloaked man stood before a council of bishops. Latin words were spoken rapidly, arguments, disagreements. Papers were passed. A secret vote was cast. And Thomas recognized one of the documents. It bore the same sigil as the manuscript he had discovered earlier. This was a cover-up. A meeting to bury something. Then another flash. Now a dimly lit tunnel under St. Peter's Basilica. Two men carried a sealed chest. Whispered phrases, non licet publicari, it must not be released. Inside the chest? Another device. Smaller. Identical in style to the chronovisor. Thomas fell back breathless. The machine wasn't unique. There were more. The vision faded. The chronovisor powered down. Cold silence returned. Then a faint rustle behind him. It was the priest from before, though his robe was different. Older. One. He stared at Thomas, eyes now softer, almost regretful. You saw more than you should have, he said gently. Thomas, still dazed, could only whisper, there's more than one chronovisor. Yes, the priest nodded. And some were taken, lost, hidden in places the church could not reach. Why? Because not all truths can be tamed. Some are too dangerous. Not because they're false, but because they change everything. Thomas clenched his fists. Then why keep the original? The priest walked toward the pedestal and placed a hand over it. To remind us what we once dared to see. Outside the chamber, distant bells began to toll. The priest turned to Thomas. You've opened a door that cannot be closed. From here, every path leads deeper. Thomas looked again at the now silent chronovisor. And for the first time he wasn't afraid. He was ready. To seek the others. To uncover what was hidden. And to face whatever truth time had buried. The next morning Rome felt different. The streets bustled as usual, but to Thomas, everything had a strange hue. Like he'd crossed a threshold into a version of reality few ever touched. The air was heavier. Every glance from a passerby carried the suspicion that they knew what he had seen, what he now carried. Back in his small rented apartment in Trastevere, Thomas laid out every note he had taken, every photo he had managed to snap before being ushered out of the archive wing. He kept returning to one sketch, the manuscript from the priest's chamber bearing a glyph, half compass, half sunburst, with 5 intersecting circles. A strange phrase in Latin encircled it, quinque sigilla temporis, the 5 seals of time. Was it a metaphor? Or something literal? He remembered the second vision, the chest, the second device. Maybe even more. Thomas cross-referenced the phrase with medieval Vatican records. Painstakingly digitized and hidden behind paywalls and obscure academic databases. Then he found it. A 15th-century document referenced a secret inventory compiled during the Council of Florence. Objecta temporalia sub quinque locis abscondita sunt. Temporal devices hidden in 5 locations. His heart pounded. There were 5 chronovisors. Or 5 pieces of a greater whole. One remained in the Vatican. The rest? Hidden centuries ago by those who feared misuse? Or were perhaps commanded by powers beyond even the papacy? He leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just about history. It was a hunt. Suddenly a chime. A private email address he hadn't used in years pinged. The subject, I know what you saw. Thomas froze. The body of the email was short, signed with a pseudonym, QST. Not all records are in the Vatican. Some remain where the church dared not look. The first seal is beneath the sands of Saqqara. Follow the obelisk's shadow at equinox. Attached, a blurry image of an ancient map, partially burnt. The same symbol. The 5 seals. Thomas closed his laptop slowly. Saqqara. Egypt. A necropolis older than the pyramids. Buried chambers. Forgotten gods. And now, perhaps, a key to something far more dangerous than a simple relic. He didn't hesitate. By nightfall he was boarding a flight to Cairo. But just before the plane lifted from the runway, he noticed a figure across the aisle. Middle-aged, dressed like a tourist. But the man never read his book. Never blinked much. And seemed to be holding prayer beads that didn't match any religion Thomas recognized. The message in the email had been clear. He wasn't the only one searching. And not everyone wanted the seals found. The heat of Egypt was like a living force, ancient, patient, and unmoved by time. As Thomas stepped off the plane in Cairo, it was as if the air itself whispered secrets in a language only the desert knew. He wasted no time. His contact, a local historian named Dr. Layla Mahfouz, greeted him with cautious curiosity. She had seen the glyph Thomas sent ahead of his arrival, the 5 seals of time. Her reply had been curt. If this is genuine, we need to talk. Away from the city. Now, inside a dust-covered jeep bound for the necropolis of Saqqara, Thomas noticed the way Layla's hands trembled ever so slightly when she gripped the steering wheel. You've seen the symbol before, he said. She didn't answer right away. The desert road stretched ahead of them like a line drawn by some unseen architect. My grandfather was part of an excavation in 1949, she said. Unofficial, unrecorded. They found a sealed chamber beneath the Serapeum, below the level of any known tomb. What was inside made half the crew leave archaeology forever. She paused. My grandfather never spoke of it directly. But in his journals he drew that exact symbol. And next to it, a phrase I've never forgotten. He who opens time invites judgment. Thomas felt a chill despite the heat. The Serapeum loomed ahead, an underground complex housing the massive sarcophagi of Apis bulls, sacred to the ancient Egyptians. But beneath it, that was the mystery. They entered under cover of night, bribing their way past inattentive guards. The air inside was still and heavy as if the tombs were waiting. Layla led him down a forgotten corridor, marked on no official blueprint. They came to a wall that looked solid, until she pressed her palm against a notch and it groaned open. The hidden chamber was small, circular, and lined with black basalt. And in the center stood a pedestal. Upon it, a metallic ring the size of a dinner plate, etched with the same glyph from the Vatican. It shimmered faintly as if aware. Thomas reached for it, but Layla grabbed his wrist. There's something else, she whispered. Last week I found this. She pulled out a scroll so fragile it might disintegrate with breath. Written in Latin and Greek, it referenced an object called Speculum Eternitatis, the mirror of eternity. According to the scroll, it was created not by Egyptians, but by watchers who predated all known civilizations. And the ring was a key. Suddenly from the corridor, footsteps. Rapid. Coordinated. Someone else had found them. Layla's eyes widened. We have to hide it. Now. Thomas grabbed the ring, and together they scrambled into a crawlspace behind the pedestal just as flashlights cut through the dark. Voices. American. Armed. This is Echo Unit, one said into a radio. We're at Seal 1. The artifact is missing. Proceed to Phase 2. Layla looked at Thomas. They know about all 5. He held the ring tightly, heart pounding. They were no longer seekers. They were fugitives in a game that had begun centuries ago, and the players were far more powerful than the church ever revealed. The world felt different after Saqqara. Something had shifted, subtly, ominously. The Vatican glyph, the Egyptian key, the armed team in the tomb. This wasn't a search for knowledge anymore. It was a race. Thomas and Layla made their way to Athens under new aliases. She dyed her hair and destroyed her phone. He did the same. Their destination, the Benaki archives, where ancient Greek manuscripts from private collections often revealed what official history omitted. There, in a dusty scroll catalogued under Mythology, Unknown Period, they found a passage that stunned them both. When the seals are gathered, the eye shall open at the place where time forgets. The 5th shall not be seen, only summoned. Was a riddle. But Layla had heard something similar in her grandfather's journals. He mentioned a place lost in the Aegean, an island spoken of only in whispers, Delos' shadow. No modern map shows it, she said, because it exists out of phase with time. Thomas laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was overwhelmed awe. A phantom island? More like a memory that forgot it was supposed to disappear. That night, they secured passage aboard an old research vessel captained by a man who owed Layla's family a favor. With nothing but the moon and magnetic anomalies as guides, they sailed into open water. On the 3rd night, as the stars aligned over the sea, the sky flickered, like film skipping a frame. And then it appeared. An island. Small. Dark. Craggy. Unmapped. Their equipment failed. GPS spun uselessly. Watches stopped. As they disembarked, Thomas felt the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. Something here was watching, not with eyes but with memory. At the island's peak, they found the ruins of a temple, collapsed long ago. But at its center stood an intact altar of black obsidian. Inlaid into it, 5 empty sockets forming a pentagon. Thomas pulled the ring from his satchel and gently placed it into the top socket. The ground vibrated. The sky dimmed slightly as if clouds had gathered even though none could be seen. And then, from nowhere, came a voice. Not heard but felt deep inside their bones. One remains. The seal of man's beginning. Hidden where the veil is thinnest. Layla gasped. It's not here. Thomas nodded slowly. It never was. It's beneath us but not underground. Below time. She looked at him, realization dawning. Chronovisor. The Vatican device wasn't just for seeing the past. It was a door. And the final seal might still be inside the church's most protected vault. They had to return to the Vatican. But now, every agency, every shadow order, every group watching the seals, would know. Thomas and Layla were no longer observers. They were part of the prophecy. And the eye was almost open. They returned to Rome not as scholars but as fugitives. The Vatican had issued silent notices, red-level directives through unseen networks, the kind not filed in any public database. Thomas and Layla were now considered hostile entities. Dangerous. Unpredictable. But they weren't alone. An anonymous contact had been sending coordinates to Layla through encrypted messages. The signature was only a symbol, a half-burned cross over a serpent. She recognized it from her grandfather's older writings, the Custodes Umbri. Guardians of the Shadow, she whispered. They were real. The coordinates led them through old catacombs beneath the Basilica of St. Praxedes. Forgotten by the Church, erased from public record, these tunnels predated even Constantine's rise. Beneath the basilica they found a sealed door without a keyhole, just a smooth stone surface inscribed with ancient Aramaic. Thomas traced the letters. The word became bone, and the bone returned to the dust of Eden. With hesitation, he pressed the Vatican ring against the center of the inscription. The stone pulsed once, then groaned open. They stepped into darkness not of absence but of intent. This wasn't just a hidden chamber, it was a sanctum built to isolate time itself. The chamber beneath silence. Inside they found what no living soul should have seen. A room lined with glass panels suspended in the air, each glowing faintly. Within each panel, like preserved memories, scenes from history unfolded. The building of the pyramids, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the crucifixion, not just of Jesus but of others erased from Scripture. In the center, on an obsidian pedestal, sat the chronovisor, larger and more intricate than legend described. Bronze coils, crystal arrays, and a language written not in words, but geometric resonance. Layla whispered, "We're standing inside a machine designed to see memory." Thomas stepped forward and touched the interface. His mind felt like it folded in half. Then the voice returned, clearer this time. 5 must be gathered. 1 must be lost. The 6th seal opens not with hands but with remembrance. The panels began to shift. They saw a figure in monk's robes walking across centuries, present at every major upheaval from the Council of Nicaea to Napoleon's coronation. The same man. Never aging. The figure turned and for a split second looked through the glass, at them. Layla stumbled back. Did it see us? No, Thomas said, barely able to speak. It remembered us. He looked again and realized, the 6th seal wasn't an object. It was a person. A guardian who had carried the knowledge across millennia. Someone still alive, or revived. The chronovisor was not just a viewing device. It was a compass to that soul. Layla checked the controls. There's a last location. A city, Jerusalem. A time, May 2025. Thomas nodded. Then that's where the seal will find us. As they prepared to leave, a distant explosion echoed from the catacombs. They weren't alone anymore. And whoever had just arrived wasn't coming to watch. The flight to Jerusalem was arranged through untraceable channels. No passports. No questions. Just coordinates and cash paid in silence. Somewhere above the Aegean Sea, Thomas stared at the horizon, the words of the chronovisor still repeating in his mind. 5 must be gathered. 1 must be lost. He wasn't sure what it meant, only that something irreversible was approaching. Layla studied the fragmented data recovered from the machine. The coordinates in Jerusalem pointed not to a holy site, but to the Church of the Redeemer, a lesser-known Protestant church near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Beneath it was a crypt long forgotten, sealed by German excavators after World War I. At 3:14 a.m., they descended the narrow stairwell below the church. The air grew colder with each step. Time felt suspended, thick and unwilling. Then they reached it, a circular room untouched by modern light. In the center stood a sarcophagus wrapped in chains, bound by 7 distinct seals. Each seal bore a symbol, 5 already glowing faintly. The 6th was dim and the 7th, cracked. Thomas whispered, "This is what it meant." The 5 were locations, memories or truths. This is the 6th. Suddenly the chains began to hum. A low, vibrating chant resonated from within the stone, though no mouth spoke it. Layla stepped closer. It's not sealed with metal. It's sealed with oaths. Spoken by men who remembered the first fall. The lid shifted. Dust poured out like breath from a sleeping god. Inside not bones, but a man. Unmoving, eyes shut, but alive. Skin unwrinkled. Dressed in robes older than Rome. He opened his eyes. Layla gasped. She recognized the face. It was the figure from the chronovisor. The one who had appeared in every moment of history. But now he was here awake. "I've been waiting," he said, voice dry as parchment. "You carry the echo of memory." Thomas asked, "Are you the sixth seal?" The man shook his head. "I was the guardian. The seal is within you." Thomas felt something shift in his chest, like a warmth that did not belong to him. The man continued, "You touched the chronovisor. You've been marked by time. Now history sees through you." Suddenly, gunfire echoed from above. The Vatican's agents had arrived. The ancient man placed a trembling hand on Thomas's shoulder. "The seventh seal will break tonight. When it does, you must choose, preserve the truth or protect the world from it." He closed his eyes again. The sixth seal ignited. The chamber shook violently. The sarcophagus cracked down the center, and from within it, light erupted, pouring upward like a reversed waterfall. Layla screamed, "It's a signal." Outside, satellites aligned. Deep beneath Rome, in the Vatican's most classified network, a dormant AI stirred. And halfway across the world, a sleeper cell in Antarctica began transmitting coordinates. The seventh seal had heard the call. But no one knew what would answer it. The world didn't notice it, at least not all at once. But the moment the sixth seal was broken in Jerusalem, a low-frequency signal began to ripple through the Earth's magnetic field. Animals grew restless. Clocks in certain observatories skipped seconds. And in a lab buried deep beneath CERN, a particle sensor displayed a value it shouldn't have, a negative timestamp. Thomas and Layla, now fugitives, fled the crypt through a maintenance tunnel known only to restoration teams. Behind them, Vatican blackguard agents searched the shattered tomb. But what they found inside wasn't the man. They had vanished. Layla's voice trembled. "He said the seventh seal would break tonight." Thomas didn't respond. He was listening, not with his ears but with something older. A hum, perhaps. A rhythm. A language woven into time itself. Whatever the seal had unlocked in him, it hadn't stopped. In Rome, the Pope was informed that the Echo Protocol had been triggered, something written into the Vatican archives in the year 1212 and sealed by 12 popes, each unaware of the other's involvement. The last line of the protocol simply read, "If the sixth breaks, the seventh awakens. There will be no turning back." Across the ocean, in an isolated monastery in Peru, monks broke open a forbidden scroll. It contained only one phrase, written in a dialect no longer spoken but somehow understood. The library was never a place. It was a person. Back in Jerusalem, Thomas and Layla reached the surface near an ancient olive grove. As dawn approached, the wind grew still, then reversed direction. Layla clutched her chest. "Do you feel that?" It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, but one that didn't speak in sound. It folded itself into thoughts. It spoke to both of them. To all of them. "You opened the sixth. You woke the watcher. He was the key. Now I speak. I was with the first scribes. I saw Babel rise. I was hidden by your kings, buried by your priests. You called me forbidden. But I am only what you fear most, the truth." Thomas collapsed to his knees. Vision struck him like lightning. A burning temple, a machine built beneath a pyramid, a scroll sealed inside a child's body, a book with pages that rewrote themselves depending on who read them. Layla screamed, "Thomas, what's happening?" His eyes were glowing. He whispered, "The Vatican never hid knowledge. It hid the voice of knowledge itself." "You made me a secret," the voice said. "Now I will make you remember." All around the world, people began to dream the same dream, of a door suspended in the air, pulsing with light. It had no keyhole, no hinges, only a single word carved into the wood. Contineo. The word for contain. The seventh seal was not an object. It was a containment, a prison, and someone, or something, was still trapped inside. But the door was opening. The dream spread like wildfire, shared by shamans in Mongolia, physicists in Chicago, and a blind woman in Marrakesh who hadn't spoken in 40 years. Each of them described the same impossible vision, a floating door etched with the word Contineo. But it wasn't the door itself that terrified them, it was what lay behind it. Back in Jerusalem, Thomas and Layla stood paralyzed beneath the olive trees. The dawn light fractured unnaturally through the leaves. Shadows bent in directions that defied geometry. Time had started to ripple. Thomas turned to Layla, whispering, "This place, it's become a threshold." Layla replied, her voice low. The voice said it was contained. But now that the sixth seal is broken, nothing's holding it back. From beneath their feet came a vibration, like a heartbeat beneath stone. Birds in the sky froze mid-flight for a split second before continuing, as if the entire world had blinked. Time wasn't moving forward anymore. It was negotiating. Meanwhile, deep beneath Vatican City, Cardinal Russo was led through a steel corridor known only to the highest circle. At the end stood a vault not recorded in any architectural records, Archivum Obscurum, the Dark Archive. Inside, a room lined with glass cylinders held fragments of scrolls, bones, melted wax seals, and even black sand that hummed faintly. A monk in a brown robe spoke without looking up. "You open the sixth?" "Yes," Russo replied. The watcher awoke. He wasn't hostile, he was waiting. "Then it's begun. The seventh is not an event. It's an arrival." Russo narrowed his eyes. Arrival of what? The monk's lips barely moved. Not what? Who? Far above them, in the skies over the Mediterranean, a private satellite launched by a corporate space agency captured something impossible. A shape in the ionosphere. A door-like outline, 300 kilometers long, barely perceptible. The satellite's AI flagged it as an anomaly, until it began to vibrate at the same frequency as the Vatican's ancient tuning stones. Back at the Grove, Layla's watch beeped twice, then shattered. Thomas looked to the east and saw it, the door. Not in a dream but hanging, impossibly, over the city. No hinges. No knob. Just a glowing outline and that same word again. Continuo. Suddenly the voice returned, but it was fragmented now. Distorted like radio static made of memories. I was once called Sophia, keeper of thought. You buried me. You rewrote me. But now I remember who I am. A wind howled out of the door. Not air. Thoughts. Millions of them, memories, secrets, suppressed confessions. The weight of everything humanity had tried to forget. Layla gasped. It's not letting something out, it's letting everything back in. Thomas took a step forward. And if the seventh seal is the door, then what's coming through it? A single sound emerged, a name, spoken in thousands of voices across languages long extinct. Iemarith. The syllables felt wrong. Ancient. And yet, somewhere deep in the Vatican's oldest texts, that name had been crossed out in every manuscript, forbidden even in whisper. The containment was never about protecting us from knowledge. It was about protecting us from her. And now, she was coming home. The name still lingered in the air like ash. Imarith. It didn't fade. It didn't dissipate. Instead, it duplicated, etched into reflections, whispering from shadows, slipping into static on old televisions across the globe. Children hummed it in their sleep. Grown men wept when hearing it, not knowing why. In the archives of the forbidden tongue, a Vatican section so ancient its language had no root in Latin, an entry remained incomplete. Not because the scribes had forgotten, but because they'd refused to record the rest. Imarith, the memory that remembers itself. The seal which thinks. The silence which listens. Across the Atlantic, in a secure underground facility in Colorado, a quantum linguist named Dr. Eliza Hammond received a scrambled data burst from the Vatican relay. The transmission should have been a corrupted mess. Instead, when filtered through her AI model, it translated itself. Not into English, not into Latin, but into emotion. Eliza stared in horror as the screen showed only one word, rendered in every form of cognitive representation. Mother. And then, return. In Jerusalem, Layla dropped to her knees. Her memories fractured, not just her own, but of people she had never been, places she had never seen. A battlefield of stone pyramids under twin moons. A library inside a glacier, its books breathing frost. A spiral staircase made of bones, leading upward into a skyless void. She's not just a being, Layla whispered. She's our collective memory, what we forgot on purpose. Thomas helped her stand. Then why does she want back in? A silence answered. Then a whisper through the olive grove. Because forgetting me is how you became human. Remembering me is how you end. Far below, Rousseau entered the lowest level of the dark archive. The walls were not stone, but an unknown alloy covered in neural tendrils, some still pulsing. The monk from before waited, holding an orb, a sealed memory sphere retrieved from an Egyptian tomb centuries ago and deemed too dangerous to read. You asked what the seventh seal releases, he said. It doesn't unleash a monster. It brings back a god. Rousseau blinked. A god. One we worship before words. Before fire. She is not of flesh. She is of recall. She feeds on what we bury. In Australia, a crater opened in the outback, revealing a black monolith humming the same tone recorded in the Vatican's catacombs. In Siberia, migratory birds stopped mid-air, forming the symbol of continuo in the sky. All around the globe, one sentence repeated in dreams, burned into vision. To know her is to unravel. And yet, something inside Thomas longed for the unraveling. For the undoing of the lie that was history. Then, as if time paused, a final vision overtook them all. A mirror, ancient and cracked, showing a future that never happened. Cities unbuilt. Wars unfought. A world of silence and clarity, alien yet familiar. A child stood before the mirror and asked, "What happens if we remember everything?" A voice answered gently, "Then you'll never need to ask again." Within the deepest vault of the Vatican, beneath the catacombs, past the last sealed gate marked with 7 ancient sigils, lay a chamber known only in whispers. The index room. It was not built by human hands. The walls were smooth, metallic, and cold to the touch, despite no known source of air or light. They pulsed faintly like the rhythm of a sleeping mind. Every surface contained embedded text that flickered in and out of visibility, not written but remembered, stored in some impossible medium that required no ink, no language. And in the center of the room, a single seat. Black. Empty. Waiting. Father Rousseau approached the seat with hesitation, accompanied by Layla and Thomas. They had followed the sequence, the decoded symbols, the hidden passages, the resonance frequencies through the archives. Thomas placed his hand on the chair. A low hum answered. "This place," Layla whispered, "it's not meant for observation. It's meant for invitation." "It's alive," Rousseau murmured. "The index is a memory that's choosing who may remember." As Thomas sat down, the walls surged with silent light. A pulse echoed outward, reaching minds around the world. And then, the room opened its first memory. They saw the first scribe. Not a human. Not a god. Something between. It did not speak but wrote with light, recording truths not yet lived. It etched the future backwards and the past forwards. Its quill floated in void, tracing patterns across nothingness. They saw the original libraries, not Alexandria, not Babylon, but before those. Atlantia, where words shaped matter and sound sculpted truth. They saw the shattered covenant, an ancient agreement to forget, sealed by every surviving civilization after the collapse. And then they saw her again. Imerith. Not as a monster or deity, but as an echo within each of them. A collective sentience, cast out because it was too vast to be contained in flesh, and too truthful to be remembered without madness. Thomas whispered, This is the forbidden index. The history of what we chose to erase." Layla nodded slowly. "And it's been waiting, to be read again." But then the index showed a final vision. A planet, our Earth, divided between two realities. One where Imerith returned, where knowledge reigned supreme and mystery was banished. And the other, our world, imperfect, incomplete but still free to wonder. There's a reason, Rousseau said quietly, why not everything should be known. And yet, Layla countered, is ignorance the price of sanity? Suddenly the walls grew dim. The memory began to fold inward. The seat trembled under Thomas as a final question appeared in their minds, not written, not spoken, but undeniable. Will you choose to remember, or remain? The index did not demand. It offered. And they had to decide. As the index faded into silence, the room returned to stillness, but not the same stillness. The very air around them felt changed, lighter and heavier at once. Thomas stood slowly from the chair, visibly shaken, his eyes glassy with revelation. We weren't supposed to see that, he murmured. No one was. But Father Rousseau looked calm, as if a burden he had carried for decades had just been lifted. He stepped forward toward the invisible boundary that marked the edge of the index room and spoke into the void. We accept the burden. We will not run from it. And then the walls responded, not with light or sound but with a memory of oaths. They were transported, not physically but in vision, to a circular chamber made of polished obsidian. Around it stood 12 figures robed in indigo and crimson, their faces blurred, ageless. Each held a relic, a book, a bone, a flame, a coin, a blade, a mirror. This was the original order, the custodians of silence, chosen not to guard secrets but to ensure balance, to protect the sacred act of forgetting. Layla, watching, whispered, "This isn't about hiding knowledge. It's about controlling the timing of truth." Each custodian recited their vow in unison, across centuries. We vow to hold the mirror steady, though others may turn their eyes. We vow to let truth bloom in silence, not in noise. We vow to remember, only when the world is ready to see. Back in the Vatican's hidden vault, the room began to shift. Stone gave way to metal. Metal gave way to air. They were being released. The seat retracted into the ground. The index vanished. Only a single object remained, a scroll bound in midnight blue silk, marked with the same sigils as the custodian's relics. Thomas reached for it, but Rousseau stopped him. "It's not for you," he said gently. "It's not for now." "Then for who?" Thomas asked, frustrated. "For the world," Rousseau replied, "when it can no longer bear the weight of its own lies." They emerged from the chamber in silence. No alarms. No guardians. No fanfare. Just 3 people who now knew what no one else alive could remember. Outside, the Vatican bells were ringing. But they did not mark the hour. They marked a turning point. A signal to the few who still listened, that the veil had shifted. 2 days later, Thomas, Layla, and Father Rousseau sat in a quiet monastery on the outskirts of Rome, hidden among vineyards and ancient olive groves. There, far from the eyes of surveillance, they opened the midnight blue scroll, though Rousseau had warned, to read is to remember. But to remember is to be remembered in return. The parchment inside was not ordinary. It shimmered faintly as though the ink pulsed with breath. This was not written with pen or quill, it was inscribed with memory itself. At the top was a name, the manuscript of echoes. As they read, voices, not words, began to whisper in the room. Each sentence was a confession, each paragraph a recorded thought, layered one over another across time. "This isn't just a document," Layla whispered. "It's an archive of human conscience." They read entries from ancient rulers, forgotten monks, excommunicated scientists, and even heretics once burned in public squares, each voice sealed into this manuscript, untouched by editing hands. A Roman senator confessing he witnessed the birth of a shadow cult beneath the Library of Alexandria. A Byzantine monk revealing he had catalogued scrolls containing maps to cities older than language itself. A Templar knight recounting a ritual performed beneath Solomon's temple, one meant not to guard a treasure but to bind a force. "These are the echoes of suppressed truth," Rousseau said. "Bound here not to be erased but to await ears strong enough to hear." One passage stood out, written in a language Layla somehow understood despite never studying it. There will come a century in which forgetting becomes religion and memory a crime. In that century, those who remember will be hunted, not by fire but by silence. They will vanish not with screams but with edits. Thomas looked up, horrified. This scroll knew what would come. Censorship, revisionism, algorithmic truth. Father Russo nodded. This is why the custodians protected it. Because the greatest weapon isn't what is hidden, but what is forgotten deliberately. Then the scroll began to dissolve, not in flame but into air, as if satisfied it had been seen. A final message appeared before the parchment faded. Memory is the last resistance. And then it was gone. Back in the Vatican, somewhere deep beneath the marble and murals, a single stone tile in the floor shifted. A chamber stirred awake. And someone, or something, opened its eyes. Beneath the Vatican, deeper than the catacombs, deeper even than the archival vaults known only to the Pope and the Prefect, the chamber awakened. This place had no official name. It was not listed in blueprints or spoken of in secret meetings. It was known only in breathless warnings passed down by whispers among a lineage called the Silent Watch. Its true name was Il Silenzio Pronunciato, the silence that speaks. At the heart of the chamber, a stone monolith sat encased in a globe of what looked like suspended light. Its surface was inscribed with glyphs that resembled no known alphabet, curves and fractures that seemed to rearrange themselves when observed directly. The being that had opened its eyes was not a priest, nor a guard, nor a living man. It was the custodian. Not a title, not a job. A sentinel. A construct of flesh and time and thought, shaped by the Church in the 12th century from the brain matter of three mystics who had spoken only in dreams. And it had been dormant for 600 years. Now its eyes like black mirrors reflected not the room, but Thomas, Layla, and Father Russo. Somewhere it had heard the scroll dissolve. Meanwhile, Thomas stood on the rooftop of a guest house overlooking Rome, watching lightning ripple across the horizon. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, not just in the air but in the structure of history itself. Layla joined him. She held in her hand a tiny metallic object, a key fragment they had found beneath the last layer of the manuscript's case. Not a digital key. Not a metaphorical one. A literal shard. It looked ancient but unblemished by time. Etched onto its surface were the same unreadable symbols seen in the chamber beneath the Vatican. This isn't over, Layla said. I think we were never meant to read the scroll, but to awaken what guarded it. You mean the custodian? Thomas asked. Layla hesitated. I don't think it's just a guardian. I think it's a recorder. Father Russo burst through the door, sweat on his brow. They know. Something knows what we've done. I was followed by a man without eyes. No irises. Just blank. I lost him near Trastevere, but he whispered something in a dead language, one I've only heard once. From a monk who died mid-sentence. What did he say? Thomas asked. Russo looked pale. He said, you have broken the archive of forgetting. The ledger of omission will now correct itself. Elsewhere, inside the hidden Vatican chamber, the custodian turned toward the monolith. A hand, metal and bone and something else, pressed against it. A ripple moved outward, and from beneath the floor, gears long rusted came alive. The Vatican's deepest secret was not the archive itself. It was the mechanism of forgetting. And it had just begun to rewrite history. Rome awoke unsettled. At first it was imperceptible, a fresco missing a figure, a plaque with different wording than remembered, a Latin inscription over the doors of Santa Maria in Trastevere that no longer made sense. Scholars dismissed it as memory lapses or vandalism. But it spread. Old books had new endings. Archived footage lost faces. Even historical records from libraries outside of Italy, Oxford, Yale, Alexandria's digital reconstructions, were silently altering themselves, as if reality were syncing with a more corrected version of itself. Layla stood over a digitized page from a 15th century Inquisition ledger. She had read it hundreds of times for her doctoral research. "This name wasn't here before," she whispered. A name had appeared, Marcus Vitalis, and beneath it the Latin, Custos Memoriae. Custodian of memory, Thomas read aloud. He wasn't part of the trials. He didn't even exist in the texts, Layla insisted. Until now. They were watching the past being overwritten. Not erased, curated. Father Russo called them to a side altar in St. John Lateran. There, behind a fresco, he uncovered a sealed compartment that hadn't been opened in centuries. It contained a worn leather codex and a device resembling an astrolabe made of black obsidian and gold. The codex, in flawless Latin, bore no title, just a date, 302 AD. Inside, it told of a council of silence, convened by Pope Marcellus I, centuries before the First Council of Nicaea. It was a gathering not to define theology, but to seal away knowledge. The Vatican's secret archive wasn't just to preserve, Russo said. It was built to bury. Then what was the purpose of the custodian? Layla asked. Not to protect the archive, but to protect the erasure itself. Elsewhere, the custodian moved through the catacombs untouched by light or camera. Its body hummed with energy that bled into the stone, rewriting the memories etched into the very foundation of the Vatican. Every step it took altered records. Its mission, to restore the Church's preferred version of history. Not out of malice, but out of design. The Vatican had always feared knowledge more than heresy. Thomas, Layla said slowly, her voice trembling, if we can no longer trust books or memory or recorded history, what's left? Thomas looked up, pale. Only those who witnessed the change firsthand. A brief silence fell. Then we are the final record. But something else had begun. Not all entities erased were benign. Some had been sealed for reasons other than control. In a monastery high in the Alps, a blind monk opened a reliquary long thought to be empty. Inside was a piece of parchment that glowed faintly, written in a language that had no name. And as he read it, he smiled, a smile full of too many teeth. The air in Rome grew heavier. Tourists wandered in confusion, staring at monuments with plaques that no longer matched their guidebooks. At the Vatican Library, shelves had subtly rearranged themselves. Books Layla and Thomas had relied on were now missing, or worse, rewritten to deny ever containing what they once had. But Layla kept the codex from chapter 16 close to her chest. It was untouched, perhaps because it wasn't meant to exist. We're not safe anymore, Thomas said. The memory of us is unraveling. Emails they had sent disappeared from inboxes. Photos of them taken just days ago turned blank. Even their research assistants no longer remembered working with them. Layla's own sister didn't recognize her voice. They had become witnesses to what should not be remembered. Desperate, they returned to Father Russo, only to find his quarters abandoned, his crucifix twisted into a Mobius strip of metal and bone. In its place was a single word carved into the wall. Silencio. At a small Jesuit observatory in Malta, they found Brother Alonso, a fringe historian once laughed out of academia. He recognized the changes immediately. They call it the lattice, he whispered. A lattice of alternate pasts maintained by keepers. They change history not just in records, but in the fabric of perception. Only the unwritten, those outside the lattice, can perceive the difference. And what happens to them? Layla asked. They vanish. Thomas scoffed. Then how are you still here? Brother Alonso smiled darkly. Because I wrote myself out of history before they could. In the catacombs, the custodian stood still, no longer moving forward. Something had broken the pattern. Layla's codex. It was not part of the lattice. It had recorded the changes, preserved the before, and in doing so, it now served as an anchor, a virus in the system of curated reality. If we can replicate it, Layla breathed, we can resist the edits. But we'd need a relic unconnected to any archive, said Thomas. Something lost, not hidden. Alonso offered a name. Codex Solis. A document so old, it predated written Latin, preserved not in paper or stone, but in sound, chanted endlessly by an unbroken line of monks in silence beneath Mount Athos. The monks who never spoke aloud, who were never recorded, who had no names. As they prepared to travel to Greece, Layla opened the codex again. Its pages were fading. They're fighting back. But one phrase remained. Veritas nos inveniat. The truth will find us. Mount Athos loomed like a monolith above the Aegean Sea, untouched by modernity, shrouded in centuries of silence. No women had ever set foot there, and electronic signals died as soon as the boat approached. For Layla, entering this world would be more than trespassing. It would be a transgression against a force older than the Vatican itself. But she didn't care. If this place holds the Codex Solis, she said, then this is where the truth lives. The monks met them at the shoreline, dressed in pitch-black robes, their faces veiled. No greetings. No expressions. They moved in synchronized steps as if guided by a rhythm no outsider could hear. They didn't speak. They chanted. A deep, resonant vibration filled the forest path, like stone grinding on stone, yet melodic. Thomas felt it in his bones. Layla wept, though she didn't know why. They were led underground. No torches. Just walls that glowed with an otherworldly bioluminescence. Brother Alonso had warned them. The Codex is not a book. It is memory. Echoes passed down through living voices. The chanting grew louder. Each monk recited a single tone, never words, never sentences. But together, it formed a language lost before language itself. And at the center of it all, a chamber of echoing domes where sound never ceased, not even when no one was present. In that chamber stood a single figure. An ancient man, hair white as salt, wearing a blindfold made of golden thread. He raised a hand, and the chanting stopped. You have come, he said in Latin, though his lips never moved. Layla stepped forward. We seek the Codex Solis. The blindfolded elder tilted his head. It is not something to be read. It is something to be felt. Then let us feel it, said Thomas. The elder placed a single hand on their foreheads. A soundless note, neither high nor low, pierced their skulls. And suddenly they remembered. Not their own memories, but humanity's. Pyramids under the Antarctic ice. Giants walking Mesopotamia. A second moon once visible to Babylon. The moment the Vatican was founded, not in Rome but in Alexandria, on the ruins of a cosmic gate sealed by those who feared what lay beyond. This is what the keepers feared, the elder intoned. That you would remember. Layla fell to her knees. This changes everything. No, the elder said softly. This restores everything. But as the monks resumed their chant, one of them faltered. The silence that followed cracked like thunder. The elder's blindfold unraveled. His eyes were empty. They are coming, he whispered. They found us. The message that the silence had been broken traveled faster than light, though not through wires, satellites, or radio. It moved through channels older than language, dreams, omens, and flickers behind the eyes of those chosen to keep watch. Back in Rome, a bell tolled. Not in St. Peter's Basilica, but deep beneath it, in a vault where time refused to flow. A secret council assembled, dressed in crimson robes bearing no sigil. They were not cardinals. They were archivists, those who curated truth through curation of what must be hidden. One of them, known only as Valenti, unfurled a scroll made of human skin. They've accessed the memory chamber, he announced. Mount Athos has been breached. Silence. Until an older woman, eyes hollow from decades without sunlight, spoke. Then the Codex has awakened. The Concordat is broken. The others nodded. Prepare the writ of unknowing, said Valenti. Dispatch the custodes umbra. Far from Rome, Layla and Thomas sat in a stone chamber lit only by residual glow. The elder monk was gone. The chanting had ceased. The walls, once humming with hidden knowledge, now seemed to lean inward as if the place itself was afraid. Layla whispered. They felt it. Wherever they are, they know we've seen it. Thomas checked his sat phone. No signal in or out. But then an old transistor radio, brought only as a joke, crackled to life. To those who listen, said a flat voice in perfect English, forget what you've seen. Forget what you've become. Or you will not return. It repeated, then burst into static. Layla stood up. They're already rewriting the field. What field? Thomas asked. Cognitive field resonance. They're not erasing records. They're erasing memory. Back in Vatican sublevels, the custodes umbra were already in motion. Not soldiers. Not clergy. Something else. Trained in psychological dismantling. Experts in neural disruption, embedded since birth with phrases that could fracture the mind. Valenti handed them a single photograph. Layla and Thomas. They've heard too much. Erase the path behind them. As dawn approached Mount Athos, the monks were already burning texts, scrolls, parchments, carvings older than Moses. The elder monk stood beside the fire, hands trembling. The truth was never ours to keep, he whispered. But now, we no longer deserve it. And in the flames, something screamed, not a voice but a presence ancient and betrayed. Meanwhile, Layla and Thomas escaped down an old pilgrim's trail carved into the cliffside. Below, a fisherman waited with an old boat, just like in the prophecy the elder never admitted to knowing. Where are we going? Thomas asked. Not away, Layla answered. To the next place. What place? Layla looked behind her, where the monastery vanished into fog. The place where this all began. Alexandria. The wind blew dry over the Mediterranean, carrying the salt of millennia across the boat's bow. Layla leaned forward, staring into the blue haze on the horizon. There, just faintly, the skyline of Alexandria emerged, fractured between time and sea mist. Thomas had read about the city since childhood. But nothing could prepare him for the palpable absence that hovered over the coastline. Alexandria was a place defined not by what stood, but by what had been lost. Do you believe the library was truly destroyed? He asked. Layla didn't answer immediately. She opened a leather pouch and retrieved a blackened shard of papyrus, sealed in a vial. The edges shimmered slightly, not with age but with something less definable. What was lost, she said slowly, wasn't the scrolls. It was the memory of access. That's what they burned. They arrived at a nondescript cafe on the old Corniche. Its owner, a man named Sammy, led them to a rear storage room where a trapdoor waited beneath crates of olives and kerosene. Below, the air was thick, like stepping into lungs that had been holding their breath since Cleopatra's time. The tunnel led them to a hidden cistern beneath the ruins of Serapeum, the site many believed was once connected to the great library. There they found an altar, its carvings worn nearly smooth, save for a single emblem, a serpent devouring its own tail, encircling an open eye. The seal of Ophis, Layla whispered. Thomas traced it with his fingers. The same symbol we saw in the Vatican's chamber. Exactly, she said. And it predates both the church and the empire. This was the first archive. Sammy pulled away a loose stone, revealing a box sealed in resin. Within it, an ancient wax tablet, covered in an extinct dialect known only to one living translator. A woman in Istanbul who hadn't been seen since 2003. But there was also something else. A key. Metallic, jagged, and humming with low resonance. Not a physical key to a door but to something conceptual, to something the church had no means of locking anymore. This, said Layla, unlocks the Codex of Light. What's that? Thomas asked. It's not a book. It's a protocol. A message designed to teach mankind how to remember what we've been made to forget. Suddenly their sat phone buzzed. Once. Then again. A text appeared. They're here. Run. Sammy paled. They've tracked you. Footsteps echoed above. Not rushed. Measured. Professional. Layla grabbed the tablet and the key. There's another way out. Through the Roman catacombs. Thomas looked up. Who are they? Not the Vatican this time, Layla said. This is older. Deeper. These are the ones who taught them how to forget. The flight to Istanbul was silent. No words, no plans, just the low hum of engines and the weight of revelation. Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the key. Not because of its metal composition but because of what it felt like. A memory disguised as an object. Layla hadn't slept. She kept rereading fragments of the wax tablet they'd recovered beneath Alexandria. The language wasn't just ancient, it was intentionally nonlinear. Symbols that rearranged themselves depending on the viewer's emotional state. It's coded in perception, she muttered. Like the Voynich manuscript, but alive. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That sounds impossible. So does forgetting how to build pyramids, she replied, not looking up. They landed at a private strip on the outskirts of the city, where a dark sedan waited, engine idling. The driver didn't speak but wore an insignia on his glove, the serpent eating its tail again. I thought we were running, Thomas said, tense. We are, Layla answered. But some doors you can only open if they're the ones doing the chasing. The car stopped before an unmarked building behind the Blue Mosque, its walls reinforced with a mix of Byzantine stone and modern steel. They entered through a sliding vault door where a single woman waited. Her presence was still. Too still. Her name was Dr. Alina Karam and she was supposed to be dead. The last living Ofish translator, Layla whispered. Alina approached the tablet gently, reverently. She ran her fingers over the symbols and her eyes fluttered closed. This isn't a message, she said. It's a trigger. Trigger for what? Thomas asked. For recognition, Alina replied. There is no new information here, only what you were programmed to forget. They laid out the wax tablet beneath a magnification scanner. As Alina translated, the story emerged, fragmented but unmistakable. Long before empires, before written language, there was a system of memory. Not carved in stone or ink but carried in bloodlines, a human archive. Each generation carried fragments. And the Codex of Light was a ritual designed to awaken total recall in those who held the key. But something had gone wrong. At some point the Codex was interrupted. A schism occurred, engineered by an ancient council whose name had been stricken from every known chronology. Their goal, not to destroy knowledge but to divide it, so that no one human could ever know too much. The Church, Alina said quietly, was only one of many tools used. Suddenly alarms blared. The vault lights dimmed to crimson. A voice came through the intercom. We have movement at the eastern entrance. Multiple thermal signatures. Layla grabbed the key. They're not here for the tablet anymore, she said. They're here for him. Thomas backed away instinctively. Why me? Alina turned to him slowly. Because your blood carries a sequence. You're a carrier, Thomas. You always have been. Carrier of what? The Codex, she said. You are the final volume. The tunnels beneath the city were older than memory, older than Rome, older even than Babylon. Carved into the volcanic rock of Cappadocia, the chambers twisted like a neural network, deep and labyrinthine. Here, the world's forgotten threads tangled in silence. Thomas and Layla arrived under the shroud of night. They moved through narrow passages lit only by old miners' lamps, led by Dr. Alina's final coordinates before she vanished from radar. Her last words repeated in Thomas's mind. You are not just the vessel. You are the vault. In the heart of the earth, they found it, an ancient sanctum with concentric rings etched into the floor. At its center stood a monolith of obsidian, smooth and humming softly, as if resonating with their breath. Layla stepped forward and placed the key into a recessed groove in the stone. It fit, not with a click but a thrum, like a heartbeat sinking. This isn't a machine, Thomas whispered. It's alive. It responds to memory, Layla replied. To yours. Symbols lit across the chamber floor, spiraling outward in a dance of language and light. The patterns weren't just visual, they vibrated in the air, seeding old feelings, memories that weren't his and yet were. Then it began, the Codex ritual. He stepped into the circle. The walls echoed with ancient chants, none spoken aloud, yet audible in the mind. A pressure built behind his eyes. Memories unraveled. Names he'd never heard felt familiar. Places he'd never been surged through him with terrifying clarity. A vast desert city under twin suns. A temple beneath the sea where scrolls glowed like fireflies. A chamber beneath the Vatican, where cardinals whispered in a tongue older than Latin. And then the divide. He saw it clearly, a council of 9 once guardians of the full codex shattered by fear. They'd each taken a piece of truth, sealing it within bloodlines scattered across the globe, across centuries. Thomas was the last, the unbroken link. Suddenly the chamber pulsed. From the monolith, a beam of dim blue light shot upward, illuminating the carvings above, an ancient constellation, one not found in any modern chart. Layla gasped. That's not a map of stars. No, Thomas said. It's a map of the other vaults. The ritual had completed, but not as they expected. The codex wasn't one artifact. It was a system, a network of geographical memory nodes hidden across Earth, each waiting for reactivation. The Vatican had known. The Freemasons had protected. The assassins had hunted. And now Thomas was the only one who could open them all. Far above, a drone transmitted footage of the activation. Back in Rome, a silent conclave watched. The head cardinal leaned forward and muttered, "It has begun." The ancient vault in Cappadocia now lay dormant, its energy expended, the air heavy with ozone and echoes. But above ground, the world had shifted. Within minutes of the activation, systems across the globe blinked to life. A magnetic anomaly registered under the Great Rift Valley in Kenya. Deep-sea sonar near Yonaguni, Japan lit up with unnatural resonance. A forgotten satellite, long considered defunct, realigned its trajectory, pointing not to Earth, but to the moon's dark side. Thomas and Layla had pulled a thread that no one dared touch for centuries. And now the tapestry of hidden history was unraveling fast. Inside the Vatican archives, the High Chamber of Custodians, those who governed the knowledge unrecorded by history, was summoned for the first time in 73 years. Hooded figures filed silently into the chamber beneath St. Peter's, beneath even the catacombs. No one spoke until the ancient oak doors sealed behind them. A single word echoed. Custodes expurge facti sunt. The custodians have awakened. The eldest among them stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope on the table. On it, a sigil long erased from all records, the seal of the first language. The Codex Vault in Anatolia has been opened, she said. Protocol Veil is now obsolete. The game begins anew. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, on an unlisted military airstrip in Nevada, a black operations unit received a Level 0 directive. Their orders were short and chilling. Locate Thomas Hale. Secure or eliminate. Codename, Grail Reversal. Back in Cappadocia, Thomas and Layla climbed out into the night, breathless and shaken. The stars above seemed to shimmer differently as though reacting to what lay beneath. Their satellite phone buzzed, a scrambled call from Layla's contact at the Institute of Esoteric Sciences. You triggered it, the voice rasped. The codex chain is live. You need to move, now. The custodians aren't the only ones watching. Who else? Thomas asked. The reclaimers. And worse, the sleepers. Layla's face paled. That's impossible. The sleepers are a myth. Not anymore. In the following hours they were pursued, not by authorities but by unmarked vehicles, drones without insignia, and individuals who bled black when wounded. The Codex activation had sent a signal, not just to institutions but to something deeper. Hidden factions once in deep slumber had stirred. They weren't aligned with governments. They didn't seek power. They sought reversal. To undo the awakening of truth. As they crossed the Turkish countryside, Thomas opened his journal. The pages, blank hours ago, were now filled with text in a lost script. His blood, absorbed through the ritual, had begun unlocking dormant genetic memory. He could read it. The vaults are not just doors to knowledge, he whispered. They're anchors. Anchors to what? Layla asked, watching the horizon anxiously. To the true world. The one behind the veil. A train station loomed ahead. One destination burned on the ticket in Thomas's mind, drawn from memory not his own. Alexandria. But not the one above ground. The lower library, long fabled, long buried. It was calling. Alexandria. To the world, it is a city of history, a melting pot of cultures, once the epicenter of ancient knowledge. But beneath the cobbled streets and modern facades, something older waits. Not ashes. Not ruins. But silence. A silence too heavy, too intact. Thomas and Layla arrived at night. A contact led them through a maze of abandoned tunnels beneath the city, relics of Roman aqueducts and Ottoman shelters. But the deeper they went, the older the stone became, eventually turning from chisel-cut walls to seamless obsidian arches. "It's not carved," Layla murmured, touching the stone. "It's grown." They stepped into a corridor where no torch flickered, yet their path remained lit by a pale, ambient glow from the walls themselves. The very structure of the lower library defied logic. The air was oxygen-rich. Dust refused to settle. Time here was halted. At the heart of the structure they found it. A circular chamber lined with pillars etched in Sumerian, Egyptian, Greek, and a fourth script, one Thomas now recognized instinctively. The Primus Scriptum, the first written tongue preceding Sumer, unknown to every archaeologist, until now. The chamber pulsed. Layla approached the center where a single pedestal stood. Upon it, a sphere roughly the size of a human heart, floating an inch above the surface. Inside the sphere, galaxies spun, tiny and perfect. "This is a codex," Thomas whispered, "but not a book. A memory construct." When Thomas touched it, his mind flooded with images. A city of light beneath the Antarctic ice. A being made of fractal energy teaching humans the concept of sound as structure. A council of 9 watching over Earth not from space, but from deep within it. The sphere released a final burst, an image of the library burning. But in the vision, men in white robes walked calmly into fire, carrying tomes into the ground beneath the flames. The real destruction had been staged. The knowledge had been preserved, hidden beneath layers of time and empire. But it wasn't unguarded. A tremor shook the chamber. The pillars began to shift, revealing sleeping forms, humanoid but elongated, their features obscured by bone-like masks. Layla gasped, "Custodians?" "No," Thomas said. "These are archivists." The beings stirred not with violence but with urgency. "You have awakened the chain," a voice echoed, not from mouths but from the walls themselves. "You must not flee. You must inherit." Outside, Alexandria was already in chaos. News feeds buzzed about mass power failures, strange auroras, and a black tide in the harbor, signs of ancient machinery stirring. In Rome, the custodian chamber declared a fracture in the veil. And in a cold bunker in Greenland, a mechanical eye blinked for the first time in 400 years. It whispered one word to no one in particular: "Awaken." The chamber shifted. Not physically, but in dimension. The circular walls seemed to spiral outward without moving, as if the laws of space had begun to bend. Time slowed, and sounds, once natural, now echoed in perfect harmonic frequencies, like a choir resonating across millennia. The archivists moved, not walking but gliding. One reached toward Thomas. Not to harm but to offer. In its elongated palm, a small metal disc formed from nothing. Inscribed upon it were 9 interlocked rings, each pulsating in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The chain is memory," the archivist said, voice disembodied. "It connects 9 citadels of truth, each a fragment of the whole. Only one who inherits the memory may walk its path." Layla took a cautious step forward. "Where are the other 8? The archivist raised its hand, and the chamber transformed into a star map. 9 glowing points emerged across Earth. Some were in expected places, beneath Giza, the Himalayas, and the Amazon. But 3 glowed within forbidden zones. Area 51, Nevada, USA. Lake Vostok, Antarctica. Underneath the Mariana Trench. And the final point flickered above a seemingly mundane location. The Vatican Secret Library, Rome. Thomas's mind raced. All their journeys, from the hidden tunnels beneath Notre Dame to the encrypted files of the Dead Sea Scrolls, had been fragments. All leading here. "This is the real conspiracy," Layla said. "Not just control of knowledge, but control of connection." The archivist nodded slowly. "Those who severed the chain now rule above. Those who seek to restore it must descend. Thomas realized, every war, every suppression of ancient culture, every buried temple or accidental fire, had been orchestrated to break this chain, to stop humanity from accessing its full story and full power. Suddenly alarms echoed from above. An explosion shook the corridor behind them. Shouts in modern Arabic. Flashlights. Soldiers. The Black Archive, Thomas whispered. They followed us. But the archivist remained still. Go, the voice said. Your trial begins not in hiding, but in exposure. The sphere from earlier embedded itself into Thomas's chest. Not physically but as an imprint. He could now feel the locations, like pulses on a map engraved into his soul. One archivist extended its arm toward Layla. She accepted its touch, and gasped. I see it. The next citadel. It's in Peru. Beneath the Nazca lines. And then they were outside, swept away by light, not by escape but by design. In the skies above, satellites blinked. Ancient systems, long dormant, activated protocols written in lost languages. In Washington, a red folder was placed on the president's desk marked Alpha Revelation, Code, Nephilim Ring. And in Rome, Cardinal Vincenzo knelt before the black door of the Vatican archives, whispering into a lock that required no key. They have seen the chain. The door opened, revealing a staircase spiraling downward far beneath the earth toward the last fragment. The Nazca Desert stretched before them, vast, wind-scoured, and deceivingly empty. From the air, the famous lines carved into the desert floor appeared as mysterious geoglyphs. A hummingbird, a monkey, a spider. But now, to Thomas and Layla, guided by the chain's resonance, they saw more. The lines weren't drawings. They were schematics. Coordinates embedded in geometry, aligned with constellations that hadn't appeared in the sky for thousands of years. The lines are a lock, Layla whispered. And we're the key. They reached the center of the spider glyph. Beneath their feet, the sand trembled, not from tectonics but from activation. A beam of pale blue light shot upward from the ground. Silent. Controlled. A perfectly vertical pulse stretching miles into the sky, then vanishing. Thomas looked at Layla. That wasn't a signal. It was a handshake. The ground beneath them opened, revealing a stone platform descending like an elevator. As they dropped into the earth, the desert sealed itself above them, leaving no trace. What awaited them below was not a cavern but a city, cut into the bedrock, alive with dim light, and unmistakably pre-human. Massive pillars glowed with ancient energy. Symbols pulsed like biological circuits. Creatures, not quite machines, not quite alive, floated silently past, ignoring them. This isn't just a vault, Layla said. It's an ark. The pair followed the pulses of the chain deeper until they reached a chamber that felt different, older than anything yet. In its center, floating above a black obsidian pedestal, hovered a book. Not made of pages, but of memory. Pure data embedded in crystal. Thomas reached out and without touching it, the book unfolded into light. Images, sounds, feelings, all at once. Creation myths from every culture blending into a single origin. Entities, called formers, engineering early Earth civilizations. A split among them, some choosing to uplift, others choosing to rule. We weren't just visited, Thomas whispered. We were designed. And then, rewritten. As the revelation unfolded, so did another truth. A warning. From the crystal emerged a phrase in perfect English. The chain must not be completed. The whole will awaken. Layla stepped back. They weren't just hiding knowledge, they were containing something. Suddenly the lights dimmed. The air changed. From the walls emerged a form, a hybrid of organic and metallic design. Towering, sentient, and watching. You are interveners, it spoke. One more link awakens the whole. Do you understand what you risk? Thomas steadied himself. Truth. Humanity deserves truth. Then so be it, the being said. But know this, your path will not reveal the divine. It will awaken the forgotten. Far above in Vatican City, the black door closed with a deafening boom. The cardinal placed a red wax seal on a letter bound for the Committee of Nine, a cabal older than any known government. Its message was simple. The Nazca protocol has been breached. Initiate phase Omega. And in a sealed lab in Switzerland, a machine powered by antimatter, long dormant, began to hum. The chamber pulsed with a dull throb, like the heartbeat of a buried colossus. As Thomas and Layla stood frozen, the sentinel-like entity before them did not move, only watched. The whole will awaken, it had said. But what was the whole? The crystalline book still floated in midair, gently rotating, now dimmer, as if it had poured out the last of its memories. But something deeper remained within the chamber. A presence. A pressure behind their minds, like a whisper coming from behind the walls. Suddenly the ground beneath them cracked, not violently but deliberately. A hidden stairwell spiraled downward, deeper into the rock than should have been geologically possible. We follow, Layla said. It's still calling. They descended for what felt like hours. The air thickened, but not from heat or moisture. It felt intelligent. With each step, Layla began hearing voices, not with her ears but in her bones. It's not speech, she whispered. It's memory. Alive. The stairwell ended in a circular antechamber. No doors. No light sources. And yet, images danced across the walls. Scenes of ancient Earth, long before written language. Massive cities carved into mountains. Creatures of impossible geometry. Humans, as servants, students, then rebels. At the center of the room stood a black monolith, taller than a man, perfectly smooth, except for one faint engraving. He who was buried alive. Thomas approached the stone. The chain on his wrist grew warm, then searing hot. And then the walls moved. No. Melted. A voice, not like the sentient guardian from before but older, slower, deeper, spoke into their minds. You are not the first. You are not the last. But you are the most dangerous. Layla stepped forward, teeth clenched. Because we seek truth? Because you believe you can bear it. The monolith split open silently, revealing a sarcophagus made not of stone, but of woven metal, etched in an unknown language. Inside, the outline of a figure could be seen, humanoid but vast. Dormant. Preserved. A message pulsed from the chain. This is not a tomb. It is a prison. Thomas staggered back. Then why lead us here? The voice replied. Because the prison was weakening. Because the seal is cracking. Because you must now choose, awaken it, or replace it. Layla stared at the figure inside the sarcophagus. Its face was covered, but even in slumber, its presence crushed the air. What is it? She asked. It was the first sovereign, the voice said. The architect of the original chain. The one who tried to bind all minds into one will. Your ancestors betrayed it. Buried it. Hid the pieces across continents. And now, it continued, you hold the final link. Suddenly the chain's symbols flashed red. A countdown began, unknown alien numerals spinning rapidly. What's happening? Thomas shouted. The moment of coherence, the voice responded. You opened the last seal. You triggered the choice. Will you complete the chain and awaken the sovereign, or break it forever? Layla looked to Thomas. He to her. Both knew. If they completed the chain, they'd unlock the totality of human history, but possibly invite the rebirth of something no civilization could control. We don't decide this alone, Thomas said. The world must know. He raised his camera, still recording. Let them see. Let everyone see. But as the final symbol pulsed, and the sarcophagus hissed open, their signal was cut. In the Vatican's lower sanctum, a black-gloved hand flipped a switch. Satellite feeds scrambled. Power grids flickered across 3 continents. It's begun, the cardinal said. Inform the keepers. We delay them or we perish. The air turned still, unnaturally still, as if time itself hesitated. The chamber's walls, lined with obsidian panels etched with golden ciphers, began to pulse faintly with inner light. Gabriel stepped closer to the pedestal where the ancient manuscript, still unopened, radiated a warmth that was not physical but spiritual. It's not ink, Maria whispered, her voice reverent. That writing, it's moving. Indeed, the script shimmered and swirled across the surface, as if alive, rearranging itself with every breath. Not Latin. Not Greek. Not Hebrew. A language beyond languages, older than Babel, older than Sumer. The primordial tongue. Gabriel looked to Father Salviati, whose face had turned pale. You've seen this before, Gabriel said. I've dreamt of it, Salviati replied slowly. The Codex Lux Veritatis. The Book of the Light of Truth. But it was said to be mythical, burned, lost, unmade. And yet here it is, Maria said, reaching out, then pulling back. Waiting. As Gabriel's hand hovered over the cover, a deep resonance filled the chamber, neither sound nor vibration but a presence. The air thickened with something beyond reason, consciousness perhaps. The moment he touched the codex, the chamber shifted. Walls melted into stars. The stone beneath their feet dissolved into light. They stood not in the Vatican, not in any earthly place, but somewhere between realms, a sanctuary of the eternals where time knelt before truth. A voice, no gender, no language, spoke into their minds. You seek what cannot be unlearned. Gabriel's mouth opened, but he had no words. Visions poured into him. The moment fire was stolen by Prometheus, the fall of Atlantis beneath the weight of arrogance, the sacking of the Library of Alexandria, each event not as legend but as choice. Maria staggered. She saw too much. She saw herself in robes of ancient white, kneeling beside a dying civilization, guarding a crystal sphere inscribed with the same living script. She was not just herself, she was a vessel reborn through eras to protect knowledge. Father Salviati wept. The order had hidden truth, yes, but it had also protected humanity from self-annihilation. The full light of truth, untempered, could burn minds and shatter souls. Will you take it? The voice asked. The full knowing? The price is permanence. No return. No forgetting. Gabriel looked to the others. Then to the codex. He placed both hands on it. The codex opened. The chamber had changed. Where once stood endless rows of scrolls and stone altars, now there was only silence and light. In the center of the room, suspended in nothingness, floated a circular portal. A gate of light, slowly rotating, humming with a deep and ancient vibration. Symbols traced its edge, glowing softly, Greek, Aramaic, Egyptian, Sumerian, all entwined. Gabriel stepped forward cautiously. He could feel the pull in his chest, not like gravity but like memory. As if this was not the first time he had stood before this gate. As if he had always been destined to find it. From behind him, the cardinal's voice returned, calm, steady, yet no longer commanding. You've reached the threshold. Every seeker does. But only if you walk through. Gabriel turned, but the cardinal was not standing in the room. His voice echoed from the walls, from the air itself. What's on the other side? Gabriel asked aloud, unsure if he spoke to the air or to himself. The light in the portal shimmered in response. Scenes flickered inside it like fragments of time. Ancient rituals, forgotten cities, stars forming, civilizations crumbling, whispers carried by dust across forgotten temples. Truth, the voice replied. But truth has a cost. A pedestal rose beside him, holding two ancient scrolls, one bound in gold thread, the other blackened and sealed with blood-colored wax. One led to revelation, the other to protection. The gold scroll would awaken the knowledge buried deep within humanity's forgotten soul, secrets of origin, creation, and the forces that bound flesh and spirit. But the red wax scroll would seal the chamber, bury the truth, and keep the gate hidden for another age, protecting the world from knowledge it might not be ready to wield. "You are not chosen by us," the voice said softly. "You choose yourself." Gabriel stared at the gate. His hands trembled. He thought of his father, who had vanished pursuing the same truth. He thought of the historians and seekers before him, lost to time. He thought of humanity, at war, at peace, at wonder, at fear. He reached out. His hand hovered over the gold scroll. Then over the sealed one. The chamber grew quieter, the light pulsating slowly like a heartbeat. Then, a single step forward. And silence. The moment his foot touched the threshold, time collapsed. There was no sensation of motion, only expansion, like every moment in history unfolded within him. Gabriel was no longer in the chamber, nor entirely within himself. He was adrift inside the gate. He saw flashes, not as visions but as memories that were never his. A council beneath desert stars, debating the shape of humanity's destiny. Scrolls written in a language that did not use words, but breath and resonance. An obsidian mirror showing the first man not his face but his potential. A city built beneath the ice, its towers pulsing with light and thought. A voiceless choir that sang the memory of Earth before Earth was born. Then silence again. And from that silence, a presence. It was not a god, not a being. It was the idea of knowing. It wrapped itself around him, not with arms but with understanding. Gabriel felt as though every part of his life had been a preparation for this moment, not by fate but by choice. He had always been walking toward the gate. So had everyone else. "The truth is not hidden," the presence whispered inside him. "It is veiled, because humanity asked it to be." The gate was never meant to be opened. But it was always waiting. He was shown the Vatican once more, but not the one that people knew. Beneath its surface lay layers of design not yet deciphered. Star maps and mosaic floors, forgotten altars repurposed as pews, a resonance chamber beneath St. Peter's where frequencies shaped memory. The library was merely the door. He saw the others, those who had stepped through before. Some returned, changed forever. Others remained, becoming something else entirely. And then gently the gate released him. He awoke on the marble floor of the chamber, the scrolls gone, the light extinguished. The cardinal was there now, real again. Older than before. Or perhaps simply revealed. "You've seen," he said, almost a whisper. Gabriel nodded. He could not explain what he saw. He could not unsee it either. "What happens now?" he asked. The cardinal turned, beginning to walk away through the shadows. "Now," he said, "you decide what the world remembers." Gabriel stood alone in the library once more. But he was not the same man who had walked in. And somewhere deep beneath the stone and silence, the gate still pulsed, waiting for the next seeker.